Welcome back to today's episode. We're here to talk about Bookie, the series that came out last year. This is different for us because we technically don't do 2023 shows. It's not going to be eligible for our 2024 breakdown of the year, right?
It's okay, though, because it probably wouldn't have ended up on my best of 2023 list either.
Oh, that's great. People want to tune in to hear about a show that isn't necessarily good enough to even be on your best.
Well, it's different for Chuck Lorre because when you think of shows that he's done, you think 2.5 Men, The Big Bang Theory, Mom, Bob Hart,
you look these up?
Abishola. I looked up, I think Bob Hart, Abishola.
This kind of upset me because this is part of my game that I was going to go into later called
Those
Lorre,
are the only ones I knew about.
Lorre or Not, but we'll get there. But yeah, so this show ran from November 30th, and I think it released 2 episodes each week till December 21st, 2023. It's also different because it's been confirmed renewed already back in January.
So it's going to get a second season.
It is going to get a second season on HBO. You know what else is getting a second season?
No.
That 90s Show. They've already released the trailer. It's going to be, I think, a 2-part.
Right.
Have you seen the trailer?
I saw the thumbnail for it.
Oh, but you don't know who's in it? Because they did release some of the guest stars, one of which is Seth Green. He's making a return. I remember in the first series, he was like Eric Foreman's rival and his dad, too. And I don't know if they got the dad who played. But they also have Wayne Knight. Wayne Knight or Norman or Newman in Seinfeld, the guy who played the Angel.
Yes, the Angel from my favorite episode.
Your favorite episode in season 4 of that
season
70s
4,
show?
episode 1, yeah.
He's coming back.
For It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, and I was not going to watch the second season, but learning that if he's going to play the same character, I absolutely will see that episode.
Why would he play anybody else? Unless you find out that they're retconning the first season or the 4th season and changing it up. But I think it's probably going to affect his daughter. Eric Foreman's daughter, right?
Yeah.
Another difference for the show is that it stars someone who we've reviewed in a future series in Griselda. Griselda's friend was played by Vanessa Ferlito.
Also from 24 and Death Proof.
So you recognized her?
Yes, right away.
Great. And then last of all, this one, the reason we're returning to it, we should really get into that, is because you felt like it fell under the radar and you did want to return to it.
Yes.
So you watched all 8 episodes. And you were going to give a summary and then your pros and cons, your individual thoughts. I've got a little bit of history on it. I got some games. And I do want to start it off this way. So you've also been watching a show from the past called The Offer, which is the lead up to The Godfather.
Yes.
It's got a massive IMDb score. Also sort of under the radar if you haven't heard
Not
of it.
Not that great a Rotten Tomatoes score.
But you did rate it, I think, one of your favorite series?
I think it was number 1 on my best of 2022 list.
Of a year or 2 ago, yeah. So do you remember Joe Gallo in that series?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you know who played him?
No.
Okay,
no.
His name is Joseph Russo. He's not one of the Russo brothers, even though there is a Russo brother named Joseph Russo. But Joseph Russo was also in The Irishman. And so was Crazy Joe Gallo.
Mm-hmm. And
the person who played Crazy Joe Gallo
was Sebastian Maniscalco, right?
Exactly.
I know that he's done some stuff with Martin Scorsese. I have never seen him in anything. I have seen some of his stand-up,
Well,
though.
can you see the Joe Gallo in The Offer being played by Sebastian Maniscalco?
They are so different.
How are they different?
Because the one in The Offer, I think, is a lot younger than Sebastian Maniscalco is.
Well, remember, The
60,
Irishman
right?
took place over 30 years. They used AI and they used all this makeup and shit.
They used AI in The Irishman?
Well, they had to make 30 years of difference. Remember they
That's
did the
right.
past
That's
scenes
right.
with Robert De Niro and all of them?
Yes.
But I'm saying, do you think that they had the same mentality or the same tone? Because the reason I ask, Chuck Lorre saw The Irishman, Sebastian Maniscalco's character, and he says, I want to make a show based around that guy. He didn't even have the premise of the Bookie in his mind.
Bookie was
he
not...
just said, this dude knows how to act. I love his comedic nuance. The guy was already a comedian, but that was what sold him on the road. So that's what makes me ask, is Joe Gallo in The Offer also a funny dude?
No. Joe Gallo in The Offer, he's setting up assassinations. There's no sense of comedy to him. However, it does answer why Chuck Lorre made this, because this is an anti-PC show. And Chuck Lorre, that's not his type of humor that he goes for. However, that is 100% of Sebastian Maniscalco's alley.
When you say anti-PC, though, you're not talking about...
It's not grotesque and it's not overly vulgar, but when you think about 2.5 Men, you think it's probably a family-friendly show. Bookie, no, this is TVMA.
I would disagree. I mean, 2.5 Men was just pure sexism the whole time, right? Wasn't it?
Think of any CBS show, though, right? Like How I Met Your Mother. It never really, like, pushes the boundaries at all. It's always pretty tame. However, Bookie, yeah, it's clearly TVMA. It's clearly on HBO.
Okay, let me do a little quiz with you on Lorre or Not, Chuck Lorre shows, okay? 2.5 Men, you already know
Yes.
that that's him. Bob Hart's Abishola, you looked that one up. Okay, how about Dharma and Greg?
Dharma
A
and
show
Greg.
from the 90s, and if you haven't heard of it, you haven't heard of it.
Are these ones that that he created?
Whether or not he created it is up to you.
I'll say he did create that.
He did create it, and they did make an appearance, I think, on 2.5 Men later on. I think the premise of the show was that there was a lady and a guy who hooked up one night, and then they decided to get married. And then right afterwards, she's like a waitress or something, and he's like a high-class lawyer, and they have to oh no, she's a yoga teacher. If I remember
That's
correctly.
what it is.
Yeah, and so they have to make it work, and it's just hijinks up from there. Shit, my dad says. Chuck Lorre or
Shit,
not?
my dad says. I think that was Chuck Lorre, right?
It was not.
Oh wait, no, it was based off a book, right?
Okay, yeah,
And then
no, it was based off something. But for sure, it was not Chuck Lorre.
I thought that he executively produced it. I knew he didn't create it because I think it was either written about a book or it was articles, and it starred William Shatner. I think
it did star William
correctly.
Shatner. You got that right. Teen Angel.
Teen Angel.
Also a 90s show.
Considering the fact that I've never heard of it, I'm just gonna say no.
Okay, but it'll come up later on.
Okay.
Okay. It actually, I think the premise of that one is even crazier. It's a high school kid who dies eating a tainted burger, but then comes back as a guardian angel to help his friend. And so, like, the main star of the show, that's why he's Teen Angel. Make sense?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, anyways. And so Lorre got the idea that he wanted to make the show with Sebastian Maniscalco, and he tapped Nick Bakay, who he'd worked with on things like Mom and Young Sheldon. And Nick Bakay has had a rich history in television. First of all, he was like a sports ESPN dude for a long time. He would do football
Bookie, okay.
in like the 90s. Yeah. He also has like, an extensive knowledge when it comes to bookies and stuff. I guess he was a big sports bettor in his day. Speaking of which, did you know that Charles Barkley has lost like $30 million in bets?
Yeah, I think there was a 30 for 30 that came out in 2005. And I think the number at that point was like 10 million.
I know Charlie Sheen makes an appearance because he's like famously lost money and stuff like that. But I think it would be cool if you got some actual people. He's also won an insane bet. I think he bet on the Patriots a long time ago, Charles Barkley did, and then won that one. Michael Jordan, they have no idea how much he's lost. I think the most famous guy is like lost over $1 billion.
Yeah, there's a famous 30 for 30 where they got a ton of athletes and they talked about the betting system.
Yeah, and how it's addictive and stuff. But yeah, but the most important thing that Nick Bakay is famous for, at least to me, is Salem the Cat. He was the Sabrina Teenage Witch animated, or not even animated, but I think he did voice it as well in that series. But he was the animatronic cat. And I think he actually played himself too when Salem would turn into a person every once in a while.
Well, one of my pros for the show I wanted to mention was it's a lot like Uncut Gems because they're talking about parlays, they're talking about the over and under, and it's obviously not a show you should watch if you're actually really into that, but you do get some of the like verbiage and kind of lessons on how bookies write it down and just have to have like a good memory in order to do that.
Yeah, and it's weird because in today's world, you would think that bookies would be dying.
Like, well, yeah, because that's even brought up as well because they're talking about how once sports betting becomes legal, I think it takes place in California, that there's even an episode where they're talking about how bookies, the need for them will die out, and that's the reason why Danny, the main character played by Sebastian Maniscalco, always tries to have a connection with the person that he's betting with because he's like, if it becomes legal, I want them to kind of have a friend in the business so they don't turn to that.
So if you could have your own bookie, would you stick to the online betting stuff?
I would stick to the online betting stuff because even though Danny and Ray in the series are bookies, they're also hitmen. They almost remind me of Jules and from Pulp Fiction, John Travolta and Samuel Jackson, Jules and Vincent, because of the dynamic that Danny and Ray have. Maybe Danny and Ray are a little closer, but they're not afraid to like threaten people for the money if they're being owed it.
Sounds a little like Get Shorty as well.
Yes. Also starring John Travolta, right? Or you can talk about...
I was talking about the TV show, but yeah, absolutely.
And then I also had Breaking Bad with Patrick, played by Bill Burr, and Huel, played by Lavelle Crawford, if you remember them. They have a similar dynamic to Danny and Ray. And like I said, Uncut Gems with just kind of the whole betting angle of everything.
So is that called a buddy-buddy comedy, or is a buddy-buddy comedy when they get along all the time?
No, I think that you could call this a buddy-buddy comedy, but they definitely have some tension between the two of them.
is one more idiosyncratic or neurotic than the other one?
I would say that
Who's
that would probably be Ray. I think that Danny is a little more level-headed. However, Danny is also more unlikable. The strange thing about this series is that the protagonist, he is very you're not supposed to like him. He's cheating on his wife throughout majority of the series.
and yet you still root for him.
Yeah, and it's almost like Curb Your Enthusiasm where they have a lot of cameos. I won't ruin a lot, but the
Well,
first person you see is Ray Romano, and
Yeah.
then among others you said Charlie Sheen.
Well, the Charlie Sheen one is the most notable because they bring him back in the first episode, right? The pilot of the
Yes.
series, and then they also bring back out of retirement the kid from 2.5 Men.
Angus T. Jones. He doesn't really have a part. You just kind of see him.
But if you see the first episode of 2.5 Men, it's that same poker game. Just he's like 8 years old in it, and they talk a lot about that to sell the show. I found it interesting though because Nick Bakay, going back to him and his role as Salem, technically that was a Disney show, and what Disney did at the time, I think, was they introduced the multiverse because one of the episodes that Salem was in, you know what he did? He ended up eating something which caused them to like travel through the dimensions of, thank God it's Friday, Disney shows. And so you had Sabrina meeting the kid from Boy Meets World, like they having.
Yes.
I think Salem was part of that. Salem was also the only other character in Sabrina that was in every single episode. And then You Wish, and then of course Teen Angel. All these different shows where Salem was popping up. And so it just reminds me of this because it shows that it's in the same sort of universe as the 2.5 Men, or at least they know it. They've even asked if possibly Ashton Kutcher would make an appearance like he did in that 90s show.
With the level of talent that they have here, because it's not just Sebastian Maniscalco, it's also Jorge Garcia from Lost in Hawaii 5-0, Hurley, Vanessa Ferlito, as we said, 24 Death Proof, Toby Huss from *Halt and Catch Fire* and 42, Rob Corddry from Children's Hospital. I mean, that is a stellar cast to be working with in this series. It's actually one of the biggest or brightest points of the show.
Yeah, Omar Dorsey is from Queen Sugar, Harriet Selma, a bunch of serious dramatic roles, and then hopped over to do this comedy. Andrea Anders as Sandra is in that 90s show.
Sandra plays Danny's wife.
Yeah, it's she plays one of the kids' moms in the thing. So it's basically they're pulling. It's a small cast, but they're still like from everywhere, you know. But yeah, so the chemistry was supposed to be the selling point between Omar and Sebastian because they had a couple people writing for the role. Sebastian was, of course, the one they wanted to get first, and if he hadn't have said yes, then they wouldn't have made the show. And then he just tested it out, and Omar fit the best.
That probably explains why Sebastian, or Danny, the guy who's playing him, he's so at home. It felt like in the series, even though his character isn't always the most likable, you can tell by the acting that he's enjoying what he's doing.
Okay,
and
so run me through these episodes real quick so I know what the plot actually is.
Well, a majority of the episodes follow the same type of structure because the quality never really changes from one to the next. It's usually Danny and Ray in some type of situation always need money from someone who's lost a bet on a sporting thing. And so, like, for the first 3 episodes, like the first episode, they're just trying to track down Charlie Sheen. The second episode, there's also kind of a side storyline about someone who saw Charlie Sheen's watch and wants to get it and hires someone to rob Danny and Ray. Yet Danny and Ray are able to fight off the villain and people died. Kind of got a little crazy. And then there's like episode 3 and 4 where they take a bet for $1.4 million and it seems like they're going to lose that money until it turns out that their team ended up winning. And then when you get to kind of the end of the series, episodes 7 and 8, that's when Danny and Ray have won big on the Super Bowl, like $3.5 million. And the final...
It's weird that the bookies are the ones who are like making the bets, but you're just saying they won big as in they took offers from clients and the clients lost?
Yes.
Okay.
So they got a lot of money in the Super Bowl in episode 7, and then people tried to rob them. However, the cops intervened, and by episode 8, it follows Danny and kind of the relationship with his wife Sandra, because Sandra is just kind of tired of the bookie world, and it ends with a cliffhanger where Sandra decides to take their kid and run off with like $500,000.
Of course.
So Sebastian decides then, or Danny decides that he's going to go after them. Also, Ray.
Sounds like Rat Race.
Yeah, well, no,
Race.
it is. They kind of throw anything at the screen and hope to see what sticks. Like, this is humor that's also very dumb. So I think that, like, if you see the first episode, that's the humor you're going to get. If you like the first episode, you're probably going to like the full series because this is something that kind of has a story off. There's a lot of payoff jokes that happen kind of later on in the series.
Off?
That have one-offs is why.
One-off.
Like, just episode by episode, kind of the humor always stays the same.
Okay. And so overall, though, what would you give it?
I would give it a 7 out of 10 because I think that the humor works well. The only problem I have is that sometimes Danny comes across as too unlikable.
Too
Because,
snarky.
yeah, well, too snarky, but it's also like it takes until the final episode for him to finally decide not to cheat on his wife anymore. And even in episode 4, he's talking to Ray about how much he's enjoying his wife because he's not having to worry about the sex because he's getting it from someone else. Also, the finale seemed like it was the weakest point because it's focused so much on Danny's story and not enough, I felt like, on other characters. That's another, I think, a con against the show is that some characters, even though it's cool to see, like Toby Huss playing Carl, who is someone who kind of wants to put Danny behind bars because he doesn't like bookies and doesn't like him particularly. Even though he's in this series, he doesn't seem to really do much, and you can say that for a lot of different things. Also,
For a lot of different people.
Lorraine, who plays Danny's sister, again, that's Vanessa Ferlito, and Hector, again, Hurley from Lost, they have a side storyline where they're trying to start a shroom running business, and Danny even figures out about it in episode 5, and that storyline never felt like it developed into anything that actually was substantial or was really that interesting. I always kind of wanted to see in the episodes what was happening to Danny and Ray because they always could find themselves in funny situations. Even in episode 2, they have to get money from a suicidal man.
It's called Making Lemonade.
Yeah, so they have to go to someone who is about to commit suicide, and they're trying to kind of stop him from jumping off a high apartment building, and then they're able to do it. So that's where the game Lemonade comes from, where it's like life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, make something good from
yeah, can you tell me where all the names come from? Because Always Smell Money is number 1. I think I can figure that out.
Yes, so actually there's an on-running joke, and the on-running jokes were really on or off in the series because
they worked or they didn't.
For the first 3 episodes, there's this joke that when Ray got back in the car in the first scene, he gives the money to Danny, and Danny smells the money, and he thinks that the guy wiped his ass with it, and just for the next 2 episodes, the money smells bad. Again, that was a joke that didn't really work, but then there were some great payoff jokes where, like in episode 6, after they fought off and figured out who kind of put the attack out for Charlie Sheen's watch, they figured out it was a waiter.
That's the Super Bowl episode, right?
Well, no, that's the one before the Super Bowl episode.
Nepo Bookies?
Yes.
Nepo Bookies.
They figured out that a waiter attacked was the one who set out the attack. And in episode 2, the waiter falls on his own knife and ends up being in a hospital. At the very end of, I think it was episode 5 or 6, he somehow, we don't even see him until then, he somehow figures out where Danny is, pulls out a gun, is about to shoot Danny, and then gets run over by a bus. So that's what I mean when it's like that was an actual funny joke. So the payoff jokes, yeah, they're hit or miss, but that's the first one.
What was your favorite joke out of all of them? Was that it?
Probably that one.
Okay. Yeah. So how about the Charlie Sheen, them making fun of the fact that Alan was a better character than him?
Well, it was so crazy to me because Chuck Lorre, I remember the 2.5 Men just kept on going after him in the finale. Yeah. So they actually it was cool to see him show up not only in the first episode, but he also shows up in the finale first.
And he's also going to be in the next season. That is confirmed.
So he's just a recurring character. That's cool. I liked seeing him there. He had probably the funniest scenes also.
The only place that I could find that they shot on location, because it was all in LA, but it looks like Champ's Sports Pub in Burbank, which has a 4.4 out of 5 on Google and a 3 and 4/5 on Yelp.
4/5.
Yeah, and there's been some other shows or movies that have also filmed there. Modern Family, You, Me, and Dupree, and Slammed. I never heard of Slammed.
I've never heard of Slammed.
It's like I think it has one of the lowest IMDb scores I've ever seen, and it was a movie I think in the 90s that has like a 2.7 or something.
I think that's on the bottom 100 probably of IMDb.
I think it's about like these women wrestlers who start a pub, and there's this guy who's like trying to help them out, and it didn't sound very good. When was the last time you actually gambled?
Last time I gambled, probably this Super Bowl.
And
I made $200 on it. I bet for the 49ers to win.
Did this show make you more inclined to gamble, or did it just veer you away from it?
Yeah, I didn't have an opinion on it. It's really not that type of show. They don't focus on the repercussions that much, which I think gave Chuck Lorre a lot. He didn't have to worry about restraints in that way.
Okay. Overall, it has a 7.4 on IMDb, so it agrees with your rating. 6.1 on Metacritic. However, that's only 3 critic reviews. Really not a lot of places got to this. 90% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. That's based off 10 critic reviews. 81% audience score. Roger Ebert, one of the 3 negative scores on Metacritic, only reviewed the first episode episode. So it doesn't really even feel like that much of a fair
But
thing.
again though, if you see the first episode, the series, it never varies that much in quality. Maybe some episodes are a little better, but it's like you get a pretty good sense of the show right away.
And why is the last episode called A Square Job in a Round Hole?
Square job around hole. Well, the reason why Sandra leaves Danny is because she wants him to get like an actual job.
Okay.
However, Danny's not into it that much because he has millions of dollars. And around hole, I'm sure I'm not actually remembering why, but they probably talked about it.
So, as far as your pros and cons, have you gone through all of them?
Yeah. So again, the humor I think works. I like the humor, the talent that the show has, the cameos, the pacing is never really a problem. So when they're talking about things, it reminded me a lot of Uncut Gems when they're talking about the phrasing and betting.
Well,
lingo.
specifically Uncut Gems when the people won to pay off their bet in that third episode. Or
also, whenever they were placing bets and they were talking about parlays and how you were supposed to go about it, the over and unders and that type of things. They also had the payoff jokes, which I thought worked really well. It reminded me a little bit of Angie Tribeca just because of how outlandish the humor got at certain points. And then again, my cons are there are kind of some stereotypical, unoriginal / dislikable characters in the series, and the finale wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be.
I'll round it off with some bookie facts. The first bookmaker it's because they're also called bookmakers, was in the United Kingdom, is considered to be Harry Ogden, who opened a business in, want to guess?
I don't even know.
1790s.
Wow. All the way back then.
And then, ironically, the most famous bookmaker of all time was played by Robert De Niro from The Irishman in Scorsese's Casino. The main character of that, they changed his name to Sam Ace Rothstein, but his real name was Frank Lawrence Rothstein.
Oh, yeah, because I remember that came out like 10 years after it happened, right?
That connection between The Offer followed into The Irishman and how Sebastian Maniscalco and like Joe Gallo and all of them come together.
With the 1790s fact, what kind of sports were they betting on back then? Who needed a bookie at that time?
Horses? I mean,
probably.
Sports go back pretty far. I mean, Olympic times they had sports. I don't know how they did bets back.
It's just weird that they had a bookie all the way back then.
Abacus or something that they were like keeping account of people. Gladiator sports, that would be interesting. Nope, that would just sound that sounds super, like, because I'm thinking more about like Django Unchained, how like they were money.
Geez.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.